Alright, so for years, Spider-Man fans have been begging, pleading, and bitching that Spider-Man needs to go back to his home at Marvel. Well, now he's back, and is this a case of it's about damn time? Or is this a case of be careful what you wish for? Spider-Man Homecoming tells the story of a young Peter Parker, a freshman in high school, still coming down from the high of his hijinks in Civil War, trying to prove himself worthy of an Avengers title. But when a new villain comes onto the streets of New York, is this finally going to be the villain, the proving grounds that he needs to become an Avenger and to prove himself to Tony Stark, or is this going to finally prove to him that he is not ready for the lifestyle of a superhero quite yet? Well, we're here, people. Spider-Man Homecoming is here. He is back with Marvel Studios. This is Spider-Man's first solo outing since Sony and Marvel Studios cut the deal, being able to collaborate to bring these movies together. And is this the movie that we've been waiting for? Before I even talk about this film, let me go ahead and just state my opinion on the overall Spider-Man movies that we've already gotten, because I feel like it's really important to kind of color to everybody where I stand as a Spider-Man movie fan. I absolutely love the three Raimi films. Even Spider-Man 3, despite its big flaws, I still enjoy the hell out of that movie. I think it doesn't get near the credit that it deserves. I think it gets unfairly shit on to a degree. And the Amazing Spider-Man movies, I do not like at all, especially the second one, but even the first one, just not that big of a fan of it. Now, when Marvel introduced us to their version of Spider-Man with Tom Holland in the Captain America Civil War movie, I thought it was awesome. It was one of my favorite parts of the movie. Even though he's in a really small part, that was one of the highlights of the movie to me. I thought that Tom Holland nailed the Peter Parker that I really know and love. The action scenes were great. The back and forth with Tony Stark, especially, and some of the other Marvel characters was great, so he was going to fit right into all the Avenger characters that we already know and love. And really all I wanted out of this movie was a fun time, a great Peter Parker and Spider-Man, hopefully a great villain, but I know Marvel track record is not that great when it comes to villains, and I just wanted them to try to do something different and unique, not to try to retread all of the themes that we got in the Sam Raimi trilogy, which the Amazing Spider-Man movies tried to recreate and do just small lateral moves. I wanted something fresh, different, and fun. And did I get those three things? Yes, I did, along with a little bit of baggage. But let's start off with the positives of Spider-Man Homecoming. First of all, let me just go ahead and say Tom Holland still nails the character of Peter Parker and of Spider-Man. He's great. I'm not quite ready to say he's my favorite Spider-Man yet because I really love Tobey Maguire, but he is great. I really look forward to seeing what he's going to do going further. He really nails the kind of naivety of that character as well as kind of the smart ass and the jokiness, and I really like his innocence and his good-heartedness. He's not the dick that Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man is.
Mr. Stark, here's my report for tonight. I stopped a Grand Theft bicycle.
Hey, could you do me a favor? Hold on to that. Is this anybody's bike?
Oh, I helped this old lady and she bought me a churro, so that was nice.
And I really feel like it was a great decision to set Peter Parker back in his early high school days, because not only does some of the greatest Spider-Man stories take place in high school, and they have plenty of time and opportunity to build to those storylines, but Tom Holland himself has a lot of time and a lot of room to really grow into this role and to give it something really different and unique and really just expand the Peter Parker and the Spider-Man that we know and love into something that's different. Michael Keaton as the Vulture. This was my big worry. Not because Michael Keaton is a worry, because Michael Keaton is badass, but Marvel, like I said, just does not have a great track record with villains. Honestly, aside from Loki and what I think is their second best villain, which is Robert Redford's character in Captain America Winter Soldier, there's not really that many memorable villains at all in the MCU. Until now. Michael Keaton was an awesome Vulture. Not only was Vulture great because this is a character that, let's be honest, nobody really wanted to be the villain in this movie. Nobody wanted Vulture. He's a strange villain. He's definitely a C-list Spider-Man villain that just kind of kept getting traction as far as studios wanting to bring this guy to the screen. And I'm glad they finally did, because their take on Vulture was awesome. It made sense in the MCU, the fact that he was kind of like this scrap scavenger, and it fits the whole title of Vulture. I loved the little wingsuit. It was intimidating. Michael Keaton was intimidating, and he was fun like the regular old Michael Keaton that we know and love from back in the 80s, as well as this new reconnaissance that he's having. And I just enjoyed every scene that he was in. He really nailed all the different aspects that you want from a villain. You want him to be charming, to kind of have some some humor to him and have the screen presence where you enjoy seeing him, but he also has this really sinister edge to him that makes him an intimidating villain to the point where you don't know if Spider-Man or even Iron Man will be able to take this guy down.
Can't you just be a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man?
Let go of me! Let go of me!
Activating parachute.
So don't mess with me. Because I will kill you and everybody you love.
Now, as far as the other side characters in the movie, mainly focusing on the kids in high school, Peter's friends, his enemies, his rivals, his high school crushes, they were all pretty good. I mean, there wasn't really anybody that extremely stood out except for one character who I'll elaborate on in a little bit. But the main really sidekick, I guess, is Ned. He's Ned Leeds, which is actually the character who eventually becomes the Hobgoblin. Whether or not they're actually going to do that or not, I have no idea. That's another point I'm going to elaborate on later. But Ned Leeds was a decent enough little sidekick. Some of his lines were really funny. Some of them fell a little bit flat to me, a little bit overuse of the humor. But he did seem like a good friend who would be Peter Parker's friend in real life. They just seemed like they would click together. There's a lot of Star Wars references with each other. They have a lot of chemistry, the two actors together, so I enjoyed his character for the most part.
You're the Spider-Man from YouTube.
I'm not.
You were on the ceiling.
What was it? Ned, what are you doing in my room?
Man, let me in. You said we're gonna finish a Death Star. She doesn't know.
Nobody knows. Well, I mean, Mr. Stark knows because he made my suit, but that's it.
Well, Tony Stark made you that. Are you an Avenger?
Yeah, basically.
Liz Allen is basically the love interest for Peter Parker in this, and she's decent. I'm not going to categorize her as a negative. She's somewhere in the middle. They just feel like there wasn't a lot of chemistry between her and Tom Holland. There's some good scenes with her. She's the leader of the academic decathlon team, so it's not the cliche direction of Peter Parker being in love with the hottest girl in school or the prom queen. He's definitely liking a girl who is very attractive but very attainable for the smart guy genius that he is. And then you have Zendaya's character, and really she's just thrown in there for some comedic relief here and there. There was a couple moments with her that genuinely made me laugh. She doesn't really add anything to the film. If you took her out of it, the movie would be exactly the same. And there's one element of her character which I'm also going to elaborate on in just a little bit. Oh yeah, I guess I should talk about Tony Stark. He's not in this movie as much as the trailers would lead you to believe. This is not Iron Man 4. This is not like Civil War where he's sharing a screen with Peter Parker. If you added up all of his screen time, it's probably maybe 8 minutes at most. I'm probably being generous with that. But they do utilize him well. He's definitely a good kind of Uncle Ben replacement for Spider-Man and for Peter Parker. He's definitely trying to be that father mentor. He's definitely trying to be somebody who's trying to build him up to be what an Avenger is. So they utilize him really well in that. He's not overbearing. He's not a huge distraction. And like I said, this is not Civil War where he's sharing the screen with Peter Parker. So I appreciate the fact that they kept this definitively a Spider-Man movie.
What if somebody had died?
I was just trying to be like you.
I wanted you to be better. I'm gonna need the suit back.
But I'm nothing without this suit.
If you're nothing without this suit, then you shouldn't have it.
Another pretty big positive for this movie, which is going to sound strange, but I feel like it works to the movie's advantage that the story is very unambitious. It's a very grounded story as far as the high school setting. It's a very coming-of-age story for Peter Parker. Most of this movie takes place around his high school classes, his high school groups, his high school field trips, and things of that nature. It's not like this big, ambitious, epic spectacle blockbuster Spider-Man movie. It's definitely more of a grounded story, and though I would like it to expand eventually in the sequels and to get a little bit more ambitious, I feel like they needed to tone it down a little bit to kind of get rid of some of the criticisms for both the Raimi trilogy and the two Amazing films, because they tackle a lot of big emotions, a lot of big storylines, a ton of villains. I'm looking at you, Amazing Spider-Man 2. But Homecoming is just a very small scale story. It feels actually really toned down from like Civil War and even Doctor Strange and movies that are really big and epic and ambitious like that. And it's kind of a breath of fresh air in that regard, because I feel like ever since Avengers, the movies have gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, and this one kind of takes its time to breathe a little bit, to get its footing, to really properly introduce this character, to really get him acclimated into this universe, and to kind of have him stand on his own as far as the tone of the movie too, so that worked to the movie's advantage in my opinion. Another approach that I really appreciated that they did in this is they really try to do Spider-Man and his storyline and even his powers to a degree in a different way than the other movies, which is a big relief, because that was the one thing I was worried about, is that we're going to have to retread the same territory that we've already gone over twice, because that was the big thing that people were worried about. It's like, are we going to have to see Uncle Ben die again? Are we going to have to see him make the web shooters again? Are we going to have to see him learn about this and this and this all over again? and it does not get bogged down in things like that. They really take some new directions with Spider-Man, like giving him the web wings and giving him some new powers as far as like the different web shooters and the different attacks that he has. They have a lot of different approaches as far as the way that he kind of has a relationship with all the characters, as far as Aunt May and as far as some of his friends in school. You don't see the typical cast like Mary Jane and Harry Osborn trying to make their return in this, at least not yet. It definitely stands on its own, and it makes something unique and different with the Spider-Man universe, and that's a big relief. And at the end of the day, this movie is just enjoyable. It's just pure, unadulterated enjoyment. Every single MCU movie is enjoyable. Even the worst ones, Iron Man 2, Thor the Dark World, I can still pop those movies in the bottom of the MCU barrel and enjoy it. And Spider-Man Homecoming is of no exception to that. It's fun, it's light, there's action sequences that's really going to catch your eye, there's humor that's going to make you laugh, there's a lot of really enjoyable back and forth between the characters. It's just a movie you can enjoy. Another big positive for me personally, because I'm a music nut, the Homecoming dance is set around the 80s theme, so you get a lot of 80s music in this, and that is a huge positive for me because I am an 80s nut. I love 80s music. Every single time a song came on, I was like, yeah! Now, as far as the negatives in Spider-Man Homecoming, let me start talking about some of the action sequences, because this is kind of the small negatives that I'm going to move up into the big negatives of the film. The action sequences are fine. There's a couple sequences that feel like retreads of some of the things we've seen in the other movies, like whenever the ferry is splitting in half and he's holding it together, it feels like kind of a weaker retread of the amazing scene in Spider-Man 2 whenever he's trying to hold the train back. There's a really cool sequence involving a plane that they showed in the trailers, but the ultimate problem with some of the action sequences, including a lot of the fights, is the way that they're shot is really kind of hard to tell what's going on sometimes. There's a lot of quick camera cuts, there's a lot of quick movements. I mean, Spider-Man's a very agile hero, and there was plenty of sequences where I'm like looking around the screen trying to keep track of what's going on, and it kind of took me out of it a few times because I just kind of threw my arms up and just watched it kind of, oh, okay, yeah. The next biggest flaw in Spider-Man Homecoming to me is the humor. Not that the jokes aren't good in this, because there's plenty of really genuinely funny moments. The MCU's got a really good track record as far as the humor, but I feel like at this point the MCU is really starting to tack the humor on way too much. I've felt this way since Doctor Strange. It was one of the things that really held back Guardians of the Galaxy 2 for me, and it does hold this movie back for me a little bit because it's like every single scene is getting hung on a one-liner or a joke or a punchline. Even some of the emotional, dramatic moments in this movie are killed because you have a really serious, tense moment or a really emotional moment, and then moments later you have a punchline or a joke, and it kills that emotion on arrival. And I don't like that. I don't like the fact that they're just hammering the humor in. I kind of want them to change that up a little bit, because one of the things that I really appreciate about the Raimi trilogy is that there's a lot of emotion, there's a lot of depth, there's a lot of genuinely grounded human moments, and I didn't get a lot of that in this movie. I got some fun out of it, but I didn't get a lot of those dramatic, emotional moments because there was always a one-liner around the corner. Really, the overuse of humor is one part of this, but I really find myself getting wore thin on the formula for the MCU movies. I think it's time, and maybe after the Avengers Infinity War kind of wraps up this 22 film incarnation of the MCU, and when we go into phase 4 they will have a little bit of this change, I feel like it's time that they need to change it up a little bit. Every single one of these movies is starting to feel very similar to each other, and even though a lot of that Marvel formula does work well for Spider-Man, probably better than a lot of the other characters they've utilized it on, by the time I get to this movie, I'm so wore thin on some of the Marvel formula that I can't quite appreciate how well it fits Spider-Man to a degree. Moving on from that, some of the characters, namely Flash Thompson. What the hell was that, Marvel? Beyond the fact that that is not Flash Thompson at all, and I will elaborate on that in just a second, that was one of the most annoying, ridiculous, useless characters that I have ever seen in a superhero movie. This guy literally is in the movie just to be a dick to Peter Parker, for the sake of being a dick to Peter Parker. He even has a scene whenever he's DJing and he says, "You say penis, penis Parker, penis Parker, penis Parker." And beyond the fact that that's not funny, why is that in this movie? I mean, it got to the point where every single time Flash Thompson came onto the screen, I kind of just rolled my eyes and waited for him to get off. I mean, and he's in a lot of this movie. They established very early on that he's a dumbass, and yet he's still on the academic decathlon team with Peter Parker and with the other kids who you're following the entire movie. So he's in just about every single high school scene, and he is such a huge flaw of a character. Now, the one element of Spider-Man that I was just not on board for at all in this, they kind of replace his spider sense with the fact that Tony Stark gave him his own version of Jarvis. Whenever he gets his updated suit, about halfway through the movie, he unlocks some additional features of it, and it comes with its own AI. It gives him all these things where he can spot people a mile away, and it has his little tracking devices, and it gives him tutorials and tells him what to do, and gives him all these little effects that he won't really know how to use unless he has somebody holding his hand through the entire movie. And I don't like that, because not only is it kind of getting rid of the whole spider sense thing, which is a really important power of Spider-Man, but it makes the movie feel too much like an Iron Man movie in some spots. It feels literally like they took Iron Man out, stuck Spider-Man in, and it's the same exact effect. You get the little POV shots of the inside of his suit whenever he sees all the Jarvis shit, and it's just not Spider-Man to me at all. So I hope that's an element that maybe they were just playing around with in this that's not going to carry forth into the sequels, because I don't like that. But honestly, the biggest flaw in this movie is a flaw that 90% of the people who watch this movie are both not going to pick up on and not going to care about. This segment is for you, comic book fans, because if you are a hardcore comic book fan of Spider-Man, you are going to be fucking pissed at this movie. Let me put it this way. If you thought that comic book fans were a tad bit upset at Iron Man 3's little Mandarin switcheroo, they play with the source material and take liberties with the source material about 30 times more in Spider-Man Homecoming. First of all, the character of Ned. They call him Ned Leeds in the movie, but every single thing about that character is ganky from the universe where Miles Morales is the Spider-Man. He is Miles Morales' best friend, not Peter Parker's best friend. Bit of a problem. Speaking of Miles Morales, apparently he exists in this universe. I don't know if he's ever going to come into an MCU movie, but there's a scene involving Donald Glover's character where he's revealed to be the Prowler, who is actually Miles Morales' uncle, and he even gives a reference to Miles Morales directly to the audience, just in case you weren't paying attention, which is just both strange, both holding the hands of the audience a little bit too much, and really unnecessary, because now you are really muddying the waters with having Peter Parker Spider-Man and Miles Morales Spider-Man lore getting blended up into the same universe. And while they're blending those two universes, all of the classic Peter Parker Spider-Man characters are really getting screwed with in this movie. I already talked about how annoying Flash Thompson was. Well, not only is he annoying as shit, but he is not Flash Thompson. Flash Thompson is a big, bulky jock guy, not a 105-pound Indian DJ. And before I even see it in the comment section, do not get me wrong, it is not a race issue with the fact that they changed him from a white guy to an Indian guy. It's the fact that he's just not who the character is. They abandoned the core characteristics of the character, a big Spider-Man character who is known and loved by Spider-Man fans, in order to either try something different or to be progressive, and they should have found a way to find a happy medium with that. You could change the race all you want, but don't abandon who the character is. Speaking of abandoning who the character is, small spoiler alert, people, but this was a really weird studio secret decision that they tried to do. Yes, Zendaya's character is their version of Mary Jane. Only her name's not Mary Jane, her name is Michelle. But at the very end of the movie, she has a line where she says, "Oh, but my friends call me MJ." But she's not Mary Jane. She has none of the characteristics of Mary Jane. Again, not a race thing, not because her hair's not red, not because she doesn't look like Kirsten Dunst. It's because that is not who Mary Jane is. Mary Jane is not some rebellious, brash outsider. That is not who that character is at all. So once again, it just feels like they are totally just tearing up and throwing away what the characteristics of these beloved characters are in order to do something different. And I'm a big fan of doing things differently, but you have to keep what makes those characters intact. Otherwise, call them something different. They even shoehorn Betsy Brandt into this movie. And if you don't remember Betsy Brandt, she was the secretary played by Elizabeth Banks in the original Sam Raimi trilogy. And that is who that character is. She is a secretary at Daily Bugle, not a 14-year-old school reporter. And that was just so weird to see. When you see the name Betsy Brandt on the TV screen and you know who that character is, all you ask yourself is, what the fuck? All right, 2 more, and then I'll wrap this up. Shocker is not 2 separate people. Shocker is one person, one definitive person with one definitive name, not 2 separate people. And that power that he uses in this movie, or that piece of technology, that's not Shocker at all. This is a piece of Chitauri technology that gives him like a super punch. That's not Shocker. That's not his power. That's not his ability. That's not his weapon. He never even wore the costume of the Shocker, which they showed production videos and they showed production pictures of the actual mask that Shocker wears in the comics. but they don't use it in the movie. I thought that was a little bit strange. In the final one, again, very small spoiler, there is a character in this who is on the big ferry scene and the scene later on in the movie, which I'm not going to spoil, that is basically leading into that character becoming the Scorpion, another really big Spider-Man villain. Only the character in the movie is an arms dealer or a drug dealer. They're not quite clear on that. But that's not who Scorpion is. Scorpion was hired as a private investigator by J. Jonah Jameson to investigate Spider-Man, and eventually he gets the Scorpion suit to take down Spider-Man. So again, you're playing with some comic book lore there, and comic book fans don't like that. Don't like that. So to wrap all this up, guys, like I said, at the end of the day, the movie is very enjoyable. It's a really big breath of fresh air for a Spider-Man movie. It does not try to retread a lot of the things that we've seen done twice in the previous incarnations, which is a great thing. Great acting by Tom Holland. I really love his take on Peter Parker and Spider-Man. Loved Michael Keaton as a villain in Vulture. I hope he comes back later on. And I really like the way that they kind of incorporate this into the MCU while not making it really distracting that this movie is in the MCU. I feel like it's definitively a Spider-Man movie. They scared some of us with some of the Tony Stark marketing, but they utilized it really well. This is a Spider-Man movie that's set in the MCU, not an MCU movie that just happens to star Spider-Man. But the movie is bogged down quite a bit by one really bad character, mostly just serviceable action scenes, a bit of misuse and overuse of humor, and some huge meddling with Spider-Man comic book lore, which is going to really piss off comic book fans, you mark my words. But at the end of the day, it's a good Spider-Man movie. Is it better than the Raimi trilogy? In my opinion, no. Is it better than the Amazing Spider-Man movies? In my opinion, fuck yes. But it's just another enjoyable entry into the MCU, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how Spider-Man's going to be used in the Avengers and what they're going to do with Homecoming 2 or whatever the hell they decide to call it going forward in the MCU. So if you're a huge fan of all of the MCU movies, and especially if you were a big fan of the Spider-Man movies, maybe not so much the comics because you might be a little upset at some of the decisions that they made, this is definitely worth going out to check out in theaters. But if you're a little war thin on Marvel's formula and their overuse of humor, and you have a big sensitivity to the comic book lore and the source material, you might want to manage your expectations a little bit. So I'm going to recommend that you go out and see this in theaters at a matinee. So what did you guys think of Spider-Man Homecoming? Are you a big Spider-Man movie fan and this was the breath of fresh air that you've been waiting for and you are glad that Spider-Man is back home at Marvel? Or did this movie deliver some disappointments for you? And especially if you were a big Spider-Man comic book fan, put your thoughts down below because I'm really curious about hearing from that demographic because there's a lot of things in this that might not go over so well. So what is your thoughts on Spider-Man Homecoming and what he's going to do forward in the MCU? Put all your thoughts on this movie down in the comment section below and we'll talk about it, guys. Please like and share this video and hit that subscribe button if you're not already a subscriber. That way you can come out and check out the rest of my content as it comes out. And if you want to check out some of my social media links, I got Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram down below, as well as my Patreon page, which is a great way to support this channel and get a lot of exclusive content from me directly and even have some input into what my videos are. So check out my Patreon page and help support this channel. Please hit that subscribe button, and if you want to check out some more of my videos, you can check out a few more by clicking right over here.